Hello, everybody. How's it going? We are live again. This is part of our live series here at Pilar's Corner, which is me. I am Pilar. Yeah, today, it's interesting because I feel like when it comes to self development and self betterment, there's a lot of different modalities, approaches, paths that you can take. And I am an empiricist when it comes to that. I'm super, or I am a big super believer in the fact that you have to do what works for you. You have to approach your growth, whatever that looks like for you. You have to approach that in a way that makes sense to you. Um, I'm trying to, oh, there we go. Um, and that can be hard. That's super hard actually, because there's a lot of ways that we can approach our self healing, self development, self growth. All those things can mean and feel like very different things depending on your background, your experiences, who you're talking to. Um, and I've had such a privilege of being able to, um, I feel like, experience the vast array of that. Um, I myself have struggled with depression. Um, I don't think I can say the S word. So I've struggled with what is the word that we're looking for? With logging myself out of the game. Struggled with that ever since I was like 12, 13 years old, super young. But I've always been hyper curious. I've always been hyper curious about other people, in a way myself, but incredibly hyper curious about other people, which as I got older certainly led the way for me understanding myself better and better. And also, you know, that hyper curiosity is unrelenting when it comes to, I would say, your 30s. Your 30s. The way I explain it to my clients is you are a non-autonomous being until your teens. It's phase out, right? There's no hard line. But towards your mid to late teens, you start to become more and more of an autonomous being, making decisions for yourself. Who do you want your friends to be? What do you want to wear? Decision making starts to become more in your power. And then in your 20s, so to speak, right? We're obviously making huge brush strokes and um, huge brush strokes, but this is not brush strokes. Is it breaststroke? Anyways, I'm not a swimmer, but our 20s, I call it the time of raw decision making. Raw decision making. When we're in our 20s, that is when we start to kind of shoot from the hip, where that's when like the partying happens, or maybe like the workaholiciness happens, or maybe the alcoholiciness happens, right? There's a lot that happens in our 20s where we're taking that ability to become firmly in our autonomous being, and we're just literally working with what we got. And a lot of what we got is deeply subconscious and coming from a place of not having had autonomy and what that relationship was like in an environment where we didn't have that autonomy. So, right? So, what do we do with that? We do the best that we can. We're completely just doing the best that we can. That's our 20s. I call that raw decision making. And then in our 30s, we start to, in our 30s, it's where we put the data cluster. It's where we put the data map. And in that data map, we determine where the clusters are. We determine where are patterns, where are tender spots that are maybe hard for us to look at. Maybe we see through lines, but ultimately we find ourselves in a place of reflection, either forced, right? Because we're like, WTF, the fuck are we doing? Or because we're like, we're in the cycle and what is happening. So I feel like in your 30s is when you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity, and you can either show up for an opportunity. This is what I tell all my clients. It's like every moment there's an opportunity. You have an opportunity at every defining moment in your life and also every not defining moment in your life. Every moment is essentially an opportunity. And the question is what you will do with it. It doesn't mean you have to do something with it. There's no judgment. We have a tendency to put a lot of pressure and a lot of stress on ourselves to do the thing. So what does that look like? When you're in that place of reflection and you're looking at your decisions, and maybe you focus on the outcomes, maybe you focus on the choices that you made. We have a tendency much more to focus on the outcomes, right? And that's where we can either reverse engineer what choice did I make, or we have a choice to isolate the outcome and feel one way or the other about that data cluster. So then in your 30s, as part of that, will you make different decisions? 30s can be the best, in my opinion, but they're also the hardest in a lot of ways. 20s are hard because um, there's a lot of cringe back there. In your 20s are like, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Right? Your 20s is where cringe goes to live. Your 20s is where cringe goes to live. Embrace that. Embrace that. That's okay. That's okay. Your 30s is where you have to reconcile with those choices and those outcomes. It was so interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day about um, relationships and people who have been in relationships since they were in high school. And I'm like, that's amazing, honestly. That's amazing. But I feel like the downside is that our 20s is when we have the biggest tendency to hurt people, right? Because we're shooting from the hip, right? We're working with what we got. We're throwing spaghetti and spaghetti at the wall. We're we're doing the best that we can with absolutely zero skill. That is that's your 20s. That's your early teens and or sorry, your late teens and your 20s for the most part. Now, certainly there's people who don't necessarily have this experience. Um, and that can be for a lot of different reasons. But ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, right? What haven't we reconciled with? What haven't we reconciled with? That's when we get to those points where we're like, oof, something doesn't feel right. I'm not feeling great. We try to reverse engineer. Have I been eating? Is it the sleep? Is there somebody frustrating me? Is work stressing me out? Right? Can be financial, right? Financial always has this tendency to um, be foundational in our sanity. But even outside of that, right? Who do we allow within our space? That's a big one. Who do we allow within our space? Who do we allow to tap into our energetic resource, right? It's a big one. And especially when maybe you're a loyalist or you live near family or you live near people who you have known for a long time. Depending on how we process those feelings, yeah, it can feel like a burden after a while. But ultimately, how are you feeling, right? How are you feeling and where are you at and what do you feel like you need? It's very important. What do you feel like you need? With that being said, once you get into your 30s, that reconciliation with your 20s is really a pathway to before your 20s, to when you were not autonomous, to when you were unable to make your own decisions and the things that you learned in that space. Do you feel like you're in a place where you can understand yourself better through the decisions that you made for yourself? Can you better understand where that came from by going further backwards, right? People pleasing, it could be people pleasing, need to protect, anger issues, outbursts, right? There's a lot of things that can come up when it comes to your childhood, essentially, right? So, what happens when we go back there? We have to reconcile with our non autonomous self. When we think about our childhood self, how do we feel? We can start there. How do we feel about our child self? And through what lens are you allowing yourself to see your child self, right? Are you looking at yourself through the lens of a family member, through specific events, through your friends, through a group of people? Do you hear labels coming through, right? What labels were attached to you growing up, right? What are memories that come up for you, right? Classically, right? If you're say you're in therapy or even working with, a mental wellness coach, they might ask you if you're going through something and you're trying to reconcile and you're trying to repair that experience, okay? Are you testing? Testing. Okay, just making sure that my mic is actually working. Are you able to remember when that has happened before? Hmm? Are you able to remember when that has happened before? That feeling of whatever it is that's bringing up in that moment. Let's see here for a second. Let me make sure. I don't know. Testing, testing. I feel like, is the audio actually even working? I don't think the audio is actually working. I will have to end stream and then come back.